In San Francisco, there is an Episcopal church named after St. Gregory of Nyssa. Now, apart from being right across the street from the Anchor Steam Brewery and Tasting Room, which would by itself make it enough something that I would love, this church is quite amazing in its own right. Inside of the church are some of the funkiest and coolest murals that I have ever seen. The cover image from today's bulletin is one of the walls, and page 5 has 2 more pictures, along with a link where you can watch a video where they've photoshopped all of the dancing saints, as they are called, into one long panoramic picture. The dancing saints encircle their cylindrical sanctuary and chancel area, joined together in a conga line of holiness. Their vivid colors and counterclockwise motion seem to make time stand still for a moment as you enter into that sacred place. And the painted figures aren't the only ones who have an opportunity to get their groove on. Before communion, the entire congregation gathers in concentric circles around the altar and dances as well. It is quite the experience. And the list of people who adorn the walls is another thing altogether. You've got your obvious ones like Mary Magdalene and Francis of Assisi, but you also have people like Eleanor Roosevelt, Charles Darwin, John Coltrane and Ella Fitzgerald, Cesar Chavez, Gandhi, Malcolm X, Martin Luther, John Muir, Anne Frank, and many, many more. A theologian named Marvin Ellison suggests that saints, rather than being spiritually pure or religiously perfect people, can more accurately be described as those who take responsibility for the world and actively resist evil and injustice as Jesus did. The people of St. Gregory's have wholeheartedly embraced this definition. The figures on their walls represent an incredibly broad understanding of sainthood, and they remind us that God works in surprising ways and often chooses surprising people for that work. Almost as surprising as the saints lining the walls of St. Gregory's are the list of blessings that we hear in today's gospel reading, or rather, list of people deemed to be blessed by Jesus. Blessed are the poor in spirit, those who mourn, the meek, and those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers, and those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Whew. If that's what it means to be blessed, I'm not so sure I want any part of it. I sometimes think that maybe we've heard these verses too often, and that the truly shocking and scandalous nature of them is somewhat lost on us, because I can rattle off these beatitudes all day long, but that still won't change what comes to mind when I think about what it means to be blessed by God. I mean, what comes to mind for you? Do these characteristics make your top 10 most blessed list? I didn't think so. Clearly, God is operating on a different definition than we are. So what do? Who's going to volunteer to tell Jesus that he blessed the wrong people? Now, it would seem, as usual, that we are the ones who need to do some rethinking. So let's dig in and see how we relate to what it means to be blessed. I think we can all see ourselves to one degree or another in each one of these beatitudes, but this year in particular, blessed are those who mourn. That one stood out head and shoulders above the rest. There is so much to mourn these days, so many losses and griefs. We have lost loved ones, lost a sense of security and sureness about the world, lost out on long-awaited events, trips, rites of passage. We have lost the ability to gather and commune with one another in the normal ways, and we mourn those losses. We mourn that loss of intimacy, mourn those who were taken from us by the coronavirus or as a result of violence or hatred or, heartbreakingly, because of indifference. We mourn the broken systems that surround us, the way injustice and oppression continue to leave their marks on this world. We mourn the loss of a sense of unity, a dedication to collaboration and dialogue in our nation. We mourn the restrictions on travel and the loved ones that we have been unable to see in person for far too long. This list covers just a fraction of what all this past year has held for us. Yet Jesus proclaims that in our state of mourning, we are blessed and that we will be comforted. The Greek word that is translated here as be comforted has the root word paraclete, and paraclete is a word that has been used to describe the Holy Spirit, and it is so much more than a little pat on the shoulder or a there in response to our distress. No, a paraclete is an advocate. It is a comforter, a counselor, a helper, the one who will seek justice on our behalf. God promises first to see our grief, to see the ways that we mourn, and then to enter into that space with us, to sit in that darkness, to sit in that sadness, to walk through the valley of the shadow of death by our side so that we are not alone in those moments. The same could be said about each one of the other blessed are those statements. God promises to enter into whatever state of being we find ourselves in. So part of what it means to be blessed involves movement. To be blessed is to have the divine draw near to us and enter into our lives, to empower us to accomplish that which we have been called to, like being merciful and seeking righteousness, and to accompany us through our hardships and our struggles. Sadly, though, God doesn't just make all of those things magically resolve themselves. Wouldn't that be so nice if that were the case? If God saw our distress and pain and with a simple snap of a finger caused them to just melt away? No, Jesus' proclamation that we are blessed does not nullify or remove us from our state of being, but neither does the divine enter into that space with us with the intent of staying there forever. No, God not only accompanies us in the midst of our troubles, but promises to transform them as well, to lead us into a new way of being in the world, a new way of being in relationship with one another, to usher in the kingdom and reorient, revitalize, reprioritize everything around us. A vision that was shown to us in the reading from Revelation. I think it's rather fitting that, in the midst of a worldwide pandemic, on the near eve of a monumental election, and given everything else we've been through this year, that we have a reading from Revelation. Nothing like a bit of apocalyptic literature to calm everyone's fears. And after hearing verse 14, these are those who have come out of the great ordeal. I think I have a new way to refer to 2020. The great ordeal. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? This reading from Revelation is a favorite at funerals and during times of great grief because it speaks with radiant hope of that which is to come, of a vast multitude from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages standing united as one, of a time and place where hunger and thirst will be no more, where neither sun nor any scorching heat will strike us, where we will be led to the springs of the water of life, and where God will wipe every tear from our eyes. It's a lovely picture. But how much good does it do us in the here and now? Is it meant simply to inspire us to hold on as best we can and wait out our current situation? Don't get me wrong. There is great comfort in hearing that things will not always be the way they are right now, that things will get better, that there is a brighter hope on the horizon. That's actually part of what the beatitudes do. You'll notice that the blessing is in the here and now, but the promise that accompanies the blessing is somewhere off in the future. Those who mourn will be comforted. Those who are merciful will receive mercy. Are these simply meant to be comforts to us as we wait? And how long do we have to wait? Are we talking a trip to the DMV here or cooking minute rice in the microwave? Waiting is not one of my favorite things to do, Nor would I list patience as one of my top virtues. I really resonate with this cartoon that I saw that asked why hurry the heck up couldn't be a virtue. But all joking aside, no, I don't think that these promises and glimpses of the kingdom are simply meant to tide us over as we twiddle our thumbs and wait for God to do God's magic. Part of being blessed involves movement on God's part, as we talked about before, God entering into whatever state of being we find ourselves in to walk with us. But it also involves movement on our part as well. The trick is figuring out what that looks like, though. One of the greatest hardships of our current state of affairs is that any ability to look ahead, to see into the future, to figure out which direction we are supposed to go, what we should be doing, has been drastically cut short. Whether it's because this pandemic laughs at any attempt to make plans, or because we struggle to agree on a common direction, or simply because we know where we want to go, but we have no idea how to get there. We are desperately in need of guidance, which is where one more dimension of what it means to be blessed comes into play. Psalm 1, as translated by theologian Earl Palmer, begins, "Blessed is the one who walks not in the way of the wicked, but in the way of the Lord." He goes on to say in his interpretation of that verse that the Hebrew word ashar, which he translates as blessed, could also be translated as to find the right path or to be on the right road. What a different way of understanding God's blessing, of understanding the state of being blessed. It means that you are on the right road when you mourn. You are on the right road when you hunger and thirst for righteousness. You are on the right road when you are merciful, when you act as peacemaker, when you feel poor in spirit, and when you are persecuted or reviled. For God has called us to be in relationship with one another, to love our neighbors as ourselves, and those are all things that happen when we live our life that way. These are all things that happen when we love and value each other. These are all things that happen when we engage in the work of kingdom building. When Jesus proclaims that you are blessed, it is assurance that you are on the right road. It doesn't mean that your troubles are over or that Jesus is going to turn everything to rainbows, but it does mean that you are following the path of faithfulness, the path that has been walked by a multitude of saints, beloved siblings of the faith, guides and mentors, teachers, forebearers of our faith who have loved and encouraged us. It is a well-worn path, but it also branches off here and there, because even those blessed saints that went before us lost their way and strayed from the path every now and then. But those offshoots always return. They always converge because of the love of Jesus. Because that's what God's blessing does. It causes the divine to enter into our lives, and then it guides and shepherds, cajoles, sometimes outright drags us back to that right path. I don't know what the future holds for us. There are so many barriers between now and then that veil and shroud our vision. But I can tell you one thing. We are on the right road when we love one another. We are on the right road when we build one another up. We are on the right road when we follow Jesus. Blessed are you, dear saints, who follow the example of the one who spoke confusing words of grace, reorienting proclamations of blessing and life-giving words to those who were most in need of them. Amen.